Good morning, and it is still morning, and boy is it a morning, but for those who were up at dinner last night, forgive me for perhaps a slower start. As Bruno said, I'm Peter Merholz. I'm president and founder of Adaptive Path. My talk today is called Upgrade Your Mandate, Elevating User Experience Within Organizations. You have my email address, my Twitter, @PeterMe, some information about Adaptive Path. Before I get started, one thing I did want to say, one of the reasons I'm really excited to be here and very thankful to Bruno for inviting me is that Adaptive Path has recently opened an office in Europe. We have an office in Amsterdam. Very small, just 4 people right now, but we're very excited about the opportunities that we're already engaging in here and the future opportunities here within Europe. So again, it's a thrill for me to have a chance to speak to folks here. So getting on with the actual content of my presentation. So I'm going to start with the story. It's a personal story of experience. I had been hired, or I had worked on a project where we were hired by a financial services firm to understand how people were managing their financial lives in order to better design. We were going to design redesign the website that the clients of this financial firm used in order to manage their accounts, finances, move money around, buy stocks, that kind of stuff. And being good user experience designers, good user-centered designers, we went into people's homes and we understood their context of use. We understood how they got their monthly statements and what they did with them. We understood where they accessed the website, whether it was at a laptop in a living room or in a more of a home office, work office kind of environment. We understood that there were some strange things, like that picture in the middle, upper middle there, where you see the blue screen. That's a woman who had an MS-DOS machine that she refused to get rid of because it had information and programs on it that she weren't sure would be able to migrate to Windows, and so she held on to it out of fear that if she tried to use something else, she wouldn't have that information with her. And so our client would have to be able to respond to people with MS-DOS machines, even in the mid-2000s. That was still a concern. So what was really interesting about doing this type of research is we really understood how messy people can be and how complex they can be and how unpredictable they can be. And the other thing that we learned is that while people do obviously use the web in order to engage with this financial services firm, there were many other touch points that they had at their disposal. They got this monthly statement. They could call a call center. They could go into a branch. They had collateral like planning guides that could help them. All of these were key elements of the experience that a customer was having when engaging with our client. And while the web experience was broken, our research demonstrated that. They had a lot of customer feedback that demonstrated that. It wasn't the only thing that was problematic. The monthly statement was overlong, too hard to understand, and people just ignored it. It offered almost no value. The call center, you have these interactive voice response systems that are a pain in the ass that nobody appreciated. People just didn't want to deal with it. And so what we realized is that there were challenges across the experience, and what customers would do is they would just route around it by going to an advisor. Calling, as opposed to a call center person, an advisor is a kind of a financial advisor that this company would offer. They would go to their advisor to try to do anything, even simply moving money between accounts. And the risk was, if that advisor left, so did the customer, right? And so now our client had no one to serve. And so we tried to impress this upon our client. We said, hey, don't just focus on the website. The website isn't the only thing that's broken. You have an entire set of challenges that you need to address. So we told this to our client, and this was the org chart of the part of the organization we were working within, which was within marketing. And specifically, way over on the right-hand side, it says interactive marketing. But we weren't even there. We were one level, actually we were 2 levels below that, was where we were working. That was where in the organization the website lived. The website that millions of customers used, one of the primary channels of engagement for customers, was kind of buried within this organization because they still hadn't really understood the value that the web could bring. And because of that, because it was so buried in the organization, we weren't able to kind of have that influence across the organization that we had wanted. Our clients, our direct clients, didn't know who in their organization designed the monthly statement, didn't know who in their organization was responsible for the call center experience. And so we basically were blocked, and all we could do was affect the website. And it was out of this frustration that I've kind of taken it as a mission on myself to try to figure out how can we change and evolve organizations? How can we not get kind of bounded in these little silos and instead be able to do everything that we need to in order to serve our users, in order to serve our customers? Basically, what I've realized is that in order to serve our audiences, in order to serve our customers, we need to engage them in new ways. We have to get rid of legacies. We have to get rid of these very rigid hierarchical structures and old ways of working and figure out new ways of engaging both internally within our organizations and externally with our customers. So I've just told you my story, which was doesn't yet have a happy ending. But I'm now going to tell you a story that I think does, and one that I and my colleagues at Adaptive Path draw a lot of inspiration from. It comes from a woman named Deborah Adler.
Happened to accidentally take my grandfather's medication. They were both prescribed the same drug, but just different dosage strengths. She took his medication by accident, and when I looked inside their medicine cabinet, I wasn't at all surprised that the error occurred. The problem was that the medication bottles looked practically identical. The only difference was their first names, which, by the way, start with the same two letters, H and E, and the dosage strengths.
So this is Deborah Adler. She's a visual designer, and she heard this story about her grandparents accidentally taking the wrong medication. At the time that she heard about this, she was a master's student at the School of Visual Arts, and she decided to research this in further depth and found out that it's actually quite common for people to take the wrong medication. It happens to, the number that I have is 60% of people taking medication do it incorrectly at some point. And sometimes this can cause death. If you misread a label that says take every Monday and you think it says take every morning, that can be problematic. So she recognized that there was an opportunity for her to perhaps help make change. Being a graphic designer, she thought that design would be a good tool for the solution, and she came up with a system that she called SafeRx. And you see a few designs here. We'll just kind of show you one and then call out some of the things that she identified that could lead to a better, safer delivery. At-a-glance drug identification. So you can much more readily see the name of the drug. At-a-glance ID for each family member. The bottles are color-coded so that each family member knows which one is theirs just by looking at the color. They don't have to read a name. Easier to read. She refined typography on the bottles so that, again, it was easier to scan and read. Much clearer intake instructions. So at the top where it says bedtime, very prominently. And then the ability to quickly get additional information. It has a flat back that allows for a card to pull out. Now, so she designed these pill bottles, did well as a master's thesis. She decided to start shopping them around. She got connected to Target, which is a big box retailer in the United States known for affordable design. And Target decided to take it on as a project internally. Now, one of the things that happened when working with Target is that they realized that some of her initial thoughts weren't necessarily feasible. So that ability to have at-a-glance identification for each family member, turns out color printers are too expensive. You couldn't print the color labels and put color printers in every pharmacy. But they recognized that things like color coding were essential. So they tried to figure out how could they solve that problem, and they came up with this idea of rings. So again, you don't need color printers anymore, you just have a set of rings that every family gets. And so it was that ability to have an initial design that stood for what they wanted to achieve, but then recognized that in the reality of production, things might have to change, but as long as they had that initial design to strive for it, that kind of gave them an orientation. And so what it led to is Target having this, what they now call the Clear RX system, which has proven remarkably successful for Target, increased sales, awards, all kinds of benefits came from it. And so for us at Adaptive Path, this is a story that we look to for inspiration. And I'll be drawing on it throughout the rest of my talk. So the first lesson that I think is important from this story is a recognition that you need to engage across functions and departments. So we're actually going to hear from Deborah again. The idea basically, how did they get this new pill bottle to the customer?
It was an enormous undertaking, and I should stress that I did not work in a tunnel at all. It was a huge collaborative effort. I worked with the pharmacy team, pharmacy operations, the Target technology team to build the software to accommodate the new labeling system, the marketing team. There were major training sessions to train all the pharmacists on how to use this new system because they were the most important people to us. They were the front line. They had to explain how to use this new system, and they had to learn how to use it. There was a bit of a learning curve involved.
So one of the things that's crucial about this story and this experience is how it couldn't happen within just one small part of an organization. It needed to span many different departments and hundreds, if not thousands of workers needed to be able to kind of rally behind this, get behind it, work together in order to make it see the light of day. And that kind of cross-departmental, cross-functional collaboration is essential in order to succeed, in order for user experience, again, to be elevated within organizations. Looking back at this org chart, what we should have done and what we didn't do when we were way down there is reach out to these different silos. We allowed ourselves to get stuck within the interactive marketing group and didn't make sure that we did things like workshops and other sessions that went across the organization. You also need to encourage those silos to be working with one another. And this is, again, a lesson that we've since learned and that we take to heart. The reality is that user experience, customer experience is a team sport. That in order to address the complexity of the kinds of products and services that we're delivering, you need to draw from these cross-functional teams. This is a photograph from a project we did for a electronic ink e-reader device. And this is just one little team as part of a workshop exercise, and it drew from hardware, design, software, industrial design, and even naming, branding, all working together, all trying to figure out what it is that we're trying to do together. So I implore you to bring different sets of people together, different functions together as you're considering what it is you should be doing. The reality is that design, user experience, isn't the sole responsibility of people with the title design. It's not the sole responsibility of the people with the title user experience. It's everybody's responsibility. Design is simply an activity. It's an activity that an entire organization embraces, that anyone can engage in, anyone can be involved in. The role of design is changing. Designers necessarily become facilitators. Designers engage these teams, these cross-functional, cross-departmental teams, get the ideas out of them, and then work to hone and refine them. So the role of design is no longer that of the genius creator who comes up with all the right ideas. The role of design is to get the ideas out of everybody and then work to make those ideas the best they can be. We did a project for citysearch.com, a website, a local information website. And I have a few photos from that project just to illustrate kind of how we have since decided to embrace design, where we had people from across, not that you would tell, but people from across their organization, people representing advertising, business, editorial, as well as design, working together collaboratively. Here you see playing with a lot of sticky notes. We do, at the very outset, workshops, ideation sessions where people are sketching, again, across the organization. And you can tell that, they're not necessarily the best artists. Some of these sketches are pretty clunky, but that's okay. We're getting the ideas out of everybody's heads. You don't have to be a good artist in order to be able to contribute great ideas for design. And then you refine those. That's our job. We take all these ideas and then we start refining them and then getting feedback. You see these sticky notes. This is feedback from the client on the designs that we had. And then there's a longer review. The reason I show this picture is the woman, it's a little hard to see, the woman in the corner there, that's Kate Rutter. She's the project lead for Adaptive Path on this project. To her left, the gentleman kind of looking at the whiteboard, is Jay Harati, who is the CEO of CitySearch. And it was important that we had, as again, broad and as kind of deep a representation on the project as possible in order to make sure that our designs would succeed within the organization. So after you've engaged across departments and across organizations, the next thing you need to do is engender empathy within your organization. So what do I mean by that? Deborah, in her pill bottle story, had it kind of easy because she was able to be very empathetic with the people who had the challenge, which were her grandparents, right? She knew them very well. She could understand the problems that they faced. We don't always, in our design work, have that opportunity to design for people that we know that intimately and that familiarly. So we usually have to engage in forms of customer research. And when companies think about customers, there's these 4 old ways of thinking that prevail. The first and perhaps the most pernicious is this idea that a customer is a gullet whose only purpose in life is to gulp products and crap cash. Not a kind view of your customer, and one that, at least in the United States, is pretty much the purview of the telecommunications companies. At a slightly more elevated level, though not necessarily a whole lot more elevated, is a view of a customer as kind of docile and gullible, that with stories and messaging you can kind of convince them to do what you want, persuade them to behave in particular ways. And as long as you appeal to their preferences, you can get them to do what you want. That's essentially equating your customers with sheep that just kind of need to be herded appropriately. Getting a little bit more sophisticated is this idea of the homo economicus. This happens a lot within technology-oriented or engineering-oriented firms. That because the engineers themselves tend to be rational, they think their customers are rational, and what they want to do is maximize utility. They want the most bang for the buck. This kind of leads to piling on more and more features, because the more features, the better, because more is better, right? If you take this to its logical extreme,
totally illogical.
You kind of get this idea of your customer as a Vulcan, which probably isn't true. And then the last and perhaps most sophisticated and a mindset born of user-centered design practice is this around task orientation. People are driven by goals. They want to be efficient and effective. I'm sure you've all heard this in various kind of user-centered seminars that you've been to. The problem is if you take this to its extreme,
Danger, Will Robinson, danger.
You get this robot, right? People aren't robots. That's not their primary goal, is to be efficient and effective, at least not all the time. And in fact, kind of what I've realized is that what you want to do is identify how you can understand a whole person's by understanding their emotional, their intellectual, and their functional needs. No one of these is sufficient, yet most companies kind of adopt one and run with it. Instead, you need to understand all of it in order to better serve your customers. We worked on a project for a bank a while ago, and we did a mental model. If you're familiar with the mental model process that Indy Young has written about, we did a mental model where we understood the tasks, put them across the top, identified the content and functionalities to support those tasks, put it across the bottom. The mental model was helpful in understanding people's activity and behavior, but it kind of responded to this robot view of a person. And we recognized that this wasn't sufficient. What we were trying to better understand was, how do people purchase financial products and services? And simply in following their activities, we realized wasn't telling us the real story. So we came up with another model that we ended up calling the thematic model, for lack of a better name. And I'm zooming in on a couple of bubbles here. But what we realized as we did the data analysis was that there was something underlying that behavior, and that was what motivated the behavior. And that's what we were able to call out here. This first top bubble that says knowledge, the thing that was really driving a lot of people's behavior was fear. Fear of being manipulated when they were trying to acquire a new financial product or service. And so they did a lot of research in order to, because they recognized that knowledge was power. They also did a lot of research because they needed to be a responsible consumer. There's this idea when you're a responsible consumer, you compare. You compare products, you compare, in this case, banks, and then products within banks. The problem was, as you can see with that middle bubble, there was no clear end state. When people are acquiring new financial products or services, they don't know what it is exactly that they want to end up with. It's not like when you go out and buy a typical physical good, a digital camera. You have a sense of what it is you want and you can kind of narrow down on it quickly. Financial products are abstractions. They're terms, fees, numbers, percentages. And so people couldn't articulate what it was when they knew they would have achieved their goal. And the combination of all that was that we saw people going through the motions. They looked as if they were behaving responsibly. And again, if you track it with the mental model, they were taking the right steps. But the thing we realized is they would never get over the hump and commit to a decision because they didn't have the information they needed. And the secret that we realized is that you needed to engage with them emotionally. Financial services firms don't tend to think about themselves in an emotional way, but people are very emotional about their money. And you needed to overcome a set of emotional requirements in order to appropriately serve them. So we realized we did have to address not just their Spock-like intellectual needs, but their sheep-like concerns and fears. And only once you address them all as a package were we successful. The sum of all of this is achieving essentially a sense of empathy. What matters when it comes to customer research is that you have a sense of empathy for your customer. You understand kind of what it is to be like them. For us, the tool that's still best in delivering empathy throughout an organization is the persona. Now, there are many different ways of doing personas. So I'm just going to highlight a few things that we do in order to really try to trigger empathy as opposed to perhaps some other practices that you see. For one, we give them simple, easy names. We don't do funny alliterative names. We don't type them. We just say, this is Russell. We don't say, this is, even though his job is the controller, we don't use that as the category. We just call him by his name, always. He's Russell. Russell is a controller. Controllers are essentially the accountants for any financial service, or for any company. This was a persona that we did for Silicon Valley Bank, a B2B bank in California. They wanted to better understand their customers. So here's one of the people that works with, is a customer of the bank, Russell. He's a controller. The details don't matter, but the things I want to call out, everything is in his voice. We write everything in first person Russell. That helps engender empathy because when you read it, you're essentially acting him out. We make sure to identify not just behaviors, but motivations. What are the things that drive his behavior? Russell is driven by avoiding crises. Russell is driven by his pride in the knowledge that he has. He's also driven by things that keep him up at night. This is something that we do a lot with personas, or what are the things that are really kind of freaking people out that you, if you're able to understand and address, you could make their lives better. What was really interesting was seeing our clients then...
Oddly enough, what keeps me going is actually avoiding problems.
And turn this into a video. They actually shot themselves. We didn't have the time or budget on this project with them to create video, but they liked the personas so much that they ended up hiring actors, shooting video of each of our personas, and they now use this internally throughout the organization for things like training as they bring on new customer service representatives to help everybody within that organization really have that empathetic sense for the customer. And I thought this was brilliant, this idea of actually hiring actors to be your personas is, I think, a remarkable idea.
Even if you know.
So after you've helped everybody understand who your customer is and what their concerns are, the next trick is to actually define the problem. And one of the things we're seeing that can elevate user experiences is by defining the problem using design tools, using the tools that you have at hand. Again, if you think back to the Target story, this defined the problem. It actually, Deborah originally thought this was solving the problem. Right? She heard about this problem that first her grandparents had, and then through some research recognized that this was a problem that a lot of people had. But what she ended up doing is, yes, it was a solution to a problem, but more importantly, it defined the problem space because it turned out these were not producible. This again was simply a thesis project. But it defined the problem space so that when Target decided to actually solve the problem, they knew what it was that they were trying to achieve, thanks to these prototypes. And so for us, what we've learned at Adaptive Path is to, as early as possible, try to define the problems in tangible, concrete ways. And there's a number of different ways you can do it, kind of depending on the degree of vividness that you're trying to achieve and how much effort you can put into it. So it can be anything from a prototype, a lo-fi prototype, to something more like a storyboard or comic scenario, perhaps a UX package, a kind of design the box exercise, or even just some simple tangible future, a magazine ad from the future. I'm going to show some examples of this. We did a project with Flickr, redesigning the Flickr homepage. And one of the things that we knew about Flickr is they love to communicate with their community through their blog. So the very first week that we're working with them, what we did was we jointly wrote the blog post that would announce the new homepage. Again, we haven't designed the homepage yet, but we wrote this blog post that was announcing the new homepage, and we did this to get ideas out of people's heads of what they thought internally, what they thought the homepage should be. And so we had them write a blog post to help us understand it, and it came up with one of my favorite metaphors here. Ooh, the stage doesn't go all the way to the back. One of my favorite metaphors here, after you've been around for a while, the homepage will feel like your favorite pair of jeans. So through these types of tangible futures exercises, you're able to get a sense of what it is that people are hoping to achieve, at least internally. You're able to gather their ideas and make something concrete that you can commit to. I showed this picture earlier of the team that was working together. This was for a project that we did, again, for an electronic reader. This was one team of many working together on a design the box exercise. So again, this was at the very outset of the project. We had people come together and design the box that this product would go in many months, if not years from now. And again, collaborative teams, people from different disciplines working together to figure it out, presenting it out to one another. And then what we ended up with is a series of different takes on what the box could be. And all of these represent kind of some different ideas of what the product could be. And then that's something you start talking about. But by making it tangible, you're making it concrete. You know what it is you're talking about. It's not just a set of bullet points that you're agreeing to. It's a vision, it's a direction that you are aiming towards. The last one I'm going to point out comes from a project we did with a retailer where they wanted to better understand how they could use things like kiosks and other interactive tools within their store. And this was a very long research project that we conducted, and what I'm showing you is actually not part of the original scope of work, but we did it anyways, which was a comic scenario of how the research findings could be realized in the world. And so we threw together this comic made of essentially photographs and a few things dropped in to help show a scenario of use of someone going to this store to buy a television, essentially. This comic, which was made in a week as opposed to the rest of the project, which was something like 14 or 15 weeks, this comic is actually the thing that our client remembers. They don't remember the research, but they love this comic because it crystallized that idea. And it's something that provides momentum to carry through the ideas to the next stage, into design. So again, use design as a way to define the problem that you're trying to solve. That's a tool, that's a gift that we as the user experience designers can bring to the rest of the organization. It's crucial that you align your values and your vision. What do I mean by this? In order for great experiences to actually make it out into the world, it needs to satisfy not just a company's values, nor just a company's vision, but these things need to work together. So if you think about the Target story, this required a lot of coordination. In most organizations, something as complex would have been killed because at some point along the way, some department would have said no. And the moment some department would have said no, that initiative would be dead. But it somehow made its way through. And it made its way through because Target has a set of values that it lives by. This is its brand vision statement: to make Target the preferred shopping destination for our guests by delivering outstanding value, continuous innovation, and exceptional guest experience. So what they were able to do, because of their values, because they provide discount retail with a sense of style, they have a value around affordable good design, they were able to realize Deborah's vision of a better, safer approach to drug delivery. So you had the values of Target around good design and innovation, and you had the vision around that prototype, that initial pill bottle. And you could combine these together, and that will get, by having both of these things aligned, you're far more likely to have success in actually delivering this new experience into the world. one of the things that we've seen, and this actually doesn't come from the Target experience, but we've seen it elsewhere, which is why I wanted to comment on it because it's proven so successful, is it's necessary to articulate experience principles. So I'll explain what I mean by that. A lot of times when we think about companies that deliver great user experience, that deliver great customer experience, we think of companies such as this: Apple, Amazon, Disney, Starbucks. These are companies that rely on experience in order to succeed. That is the value they provide. And one of the other things we think perhaps about these companies, why they're able to deliver this great experience, is because they've got charismatic, visionary CEOs that, from a top-down standpoint, made sure that experience is what the company stands for. And one of the fears I have is that if your company doesn't have a charismatic, visionary CEO, you might feel, well, forget about it. I can't deliver great experience because the people at the top aren't going to support it. They don't care about it. But what we've seen is that there are companies where there aren't the charismatic, visionary CEOs who are still, but those companies are still able to do interesting things when it comes to experience. There's TiVo, the original digital video recorder company. I am guessing nobody here knows who the charismatic, visionary CEO is. They don't, in fact, have one. But what TiVo had at the very outset, well, when TiVo launched, this was its competition, right? This was the VCR. This was the on-screen interface for recording programs, right? So this was the world that they were in. TiVo could have simply kept an interface that looked like this, but just with a hard drive instead of tape. But they realized that they had a fundamental opportunity to change people's relationship with television. And so, as an organization, they came up with a set of what they called mantras, TiVo's original mantras. It's entertainment stupid, it's TV, it's video, everything is smooth and gentle, no modality or deep hierarchy, respect the viewer's privacy, it's a robust appliance like TV. This was not a top-down edict, this was generated from the group. But what they were able to do is, by taking these on as mantras, these became religion within TiVo. It allowed them to create this next generation interface for television, as well as it influenced even things like the hardware of the remote control. TiVo since went back and updated its mantras. One thing to keep in mind with these types of things is that they can evolve over time as your service evolves over time. So they now talk about the TiVo box makes TV better. It is reliable. It puts me in control. It's easy to use. It's smart and helpful. It's responsive. I can't imagine life without it. Right? So they've kind of broadened that set of mantras. It's a little vaguer, which I don't like, but I do like the fact that it is in the first person. It's about me as the customer as opposed to the company. But TiVo continues to practice what they preach. This is an unboxing experience, and every step of the way, it's not just the interface, it's not even just the hardware. The materials that you get in the box are vetted through user experience and user-centered design processes. So when we think about how we engage our users and our customers, if you think about kind of starting from the idea of brand attributes, everybody recognizes that there's this thing called voice, brand voice, that influences how we write and talk, how we communicate. But it's less clear what are the things that we use to describe how do we interact with our customers. And that's where this idea of experience principles comes in. This is what TiVo's mantras are, and this is what I'll be showing in the next example. Another company, perhaps not one that you think of when you think of great user experience, is Microsoft. And there's good reasons that you might not think of Microsoft when you think of great user experience, because you've been subjected to interfaces that look like this, Word 6, or interfaces that look like this with Clippy and expandy menus, or interfaces that look like this with task panes on the right-hand side, right? There was this period where Office just got totally out of hand and overwhelmed. Now, these images actually come from a presentation that a gentleman named Jensen Harris gave on the story of the ribbon, which is the story of the design of Office 2007. And as part of that experience, they came up with what they called design tenets. TiVo calls them mantras, they call them design tenets. There is this kind of religious, zealous aspect, perhaps, to these qualities of experience principles. And they have this set of design tenets around a person's focus should be on the content, not on the UI, how people work without interference, reduce the number of choices, increase efficiency, etc. These became what they lived by. Many of the people who were in the Office UI group moved on to the Windows 7 group. And they came up with a set of principles for Windows 7. And not it's important to not just think about these principles in the abstract, but that you could print them out and you could put them up on your walls, and this is something that product teams can live and die by. Again, this is not a top-down edict. This is from the team articulating what they believe in and making it clear to everybody. I was talking with Joe Fletcher from Microsoft last night about this, and one of the things that he points out is that the Office group and the Windows group, the user experience groups, they're, I'm not going to use the swear word he used, but they're very adamant about these principles. They do not let people tell them no. They stick to this, and they are persistent and make sure that these principles stick. And so one of the things you need to do is really be willing to kind of go to bat or really do everything you can to support these principles. And what it does is it leads to fundamentally new interfaces, whether or not you actually appreciate these new UIs more than the prior generation. And a lot of people in more, say, technical fields actually don't like kind of what's happened to Office and don't like what's happened to well, they probably like what's happened to Windows. But it doesn't matter, in this case, I think, whether or not you appreciate kind of the change that's happened. I think it's really interesting that a company as large as Microsoft was willing to make such a drastic change. And these experience principles were fundamental to that. The last point I want to make is around this idea of building from the outside in. If you think about how an organization operates, you kind of can look at it at these different levels when you're thinking about kind of the delivery of products or services. And it tends to start at the idea of the systems. What are the technologies? What are the capabilities we have in place? And then you kind of feel it out until you reach the customer through some set of experiences. Well, that's exactly backwards. That is exactly backwards. What we need to be doing is figuring out what are the experiences that people want to have, such as something like this prototype pill bottle, and then what is it going to take to deliver it, right? It was going from that prototype, then figuring out what it took to deliver it, that you arrived at this final solution. But you needed to have that understanding of the desired experience to begin with in order to make sure that you were aligning these other elements appropriately. So these are the 6 points that I'm making today in my 40-minute talk. I'm going to finish with one story to remind us about one other aspect when it comes to thinking about user experience and customer experience that is crucial. 2 years ago, I decided that I no longer cared about being a frequent flyer on United. I had achieved premier executive status. I'd flown 50,000 miles the year before. I was a loyal customer. But all I figured that it was giving me, all I realized that it was giving me was essentially exit row seating. And this became clear when I tried to change tickets at one point, and they wanted to penalize me with the $150 change fee. So all my loyalty was essentially meaningless to them, it seemed, because when I had a very reasonable need to make a change, they were essentially going to penalize me for my life. And I decided, you know what, screw it, I'm not gonna stick with them anymore. It's not worth playing the frequent flyer game to simply be treated like cattle. And Forrester is an analyst firm, and they did a ranking, a customer experience ranking of 114 companies. And the airlines are always at the bottom of these rankings. And you can see United quite low. The only one that's not in the United States is Southwest Airlines. If anybody has flown Southwest Airlines, you know that it is a far different experience than flying the other airlines. And one of the reasons it's successful in the way that it is because of this woman, Colleen Barrett. Colleen Barrett was there from the beginning, and she was essentially responsible for the customer service that Southwest provides its customers. One of the things that's worth pointing out here is that Southwest Airlines is cheaper to fly than any of these competitors. So how are they able to deliver great customer experience yet be the cheapest option, typically, that you have? There's a quote from the founder of Southwest Airlines talking about Colleen. Colleen is primarily responsible for the humanistic culture that we have at Southwest. She gave our people on the front line a lot of flexibility. She recognized that we could not anticipate every situation that would evolve. Therefore, she told her employees and meant it that as long as you are leaning toward the customer, you are okay. So what we need to do, the reason Southwest is able to be cheaper yet provide a better experience is because they have an organizational mindset around customer experience, around user experience, and a recognition that it's the people on the front line, the individuals in your organization that are primarily responsible for this. And so what I take away from this is that good user experience isn't something you buy. It's a mindset that an organization needs to adopt. And hopefully with the suggested approaches that I've listed out here, you can help your organizations adopt this experience-based mindset. And with that, I thank you.